Screen time doesn't affect every child in the same way, and for some children, especially those on the autism spectrum, it can feel less like entertainment and more like regulation. This is where the conversation gets oversimplified. Some say take it away, others want you to delete it, others feel like they're too dependent on it. But if you've been following this channel at all, you know behavior is never random. So instead of asking, how do we stop it? We need to be asking, what purpose does it serve? Individuals on the autism spectrum thrive off of patterns, sameness, motivation, and momentum. And screens can provide all of that. Screens are much better at being predictable. We know when reinforcement's coming. We know when we do one thing in the game, what's going to happen, and things happen over and over and over again. This is much different than the real world, which can feel extremely overwhelming with all the infinite possibilities of things that can happen at any moment, especially in social situations. So what looks like obsession, which looks like rigidity, which looks like inflexibility, is really just an attempt to regulate a chaotic environment. So the challenge is screens are highly reinforcing. They provide us with that constant reinforcement, that constant feedback, variable rewards, variable ratio rewards, unpredictability, which sometimes that surprise is good, and an endless number of lives. So it can become dangerous when we over rely on that for regulation, when they become obsessive over it for regulation, when they're not able to look at other coping strategies and skills in order to help regulate themselves. That is when it can become very, very difficult because, like we said before, this is not just bad behavior when they have difficulty transitioning off, or when they display aggressive behavior, or when they start to become verbally aggressive. It's literally a nervous system pattern. So the goal isn't on one hand to either ban screens completely, or on the other hand, allow unlimited access. Is to identify the function so that you can build around it. Because once you identify other ways to provide those supports, then we can start to branch out and build our skill toolbox. So the first thing parents can do is identify the function. This helps us to know, what is the child getting from accessing the screens? Are they able to escape from something that is unpleasant? Are they able to gain access to attention? Are they able to gain access to certain sounds or characters that they don't get otherwise? Or are they just regulating themselves and it's just sensory? They just need something to pass the time by because they need something predictable as opposed to unpredictable as the world can seem sometimes. If you need help identifying the function, we have a behavior function cheat sheet that we'll link down below in the description, and you can check that out and download that as a free tool. So you can find that both in our link bio, as well as, like I said, down there in the description, as well as the pinned comments. The second thing we can do is add structure around screen time use. When are we able to use it? When are we not able to use it? For how long? What happens before and what happens after? What do I need to do before I have access to screen time? Answering all those questions ahead of time will help the predictability, because that's essentially what we're looking for here, is that we know what happens from one moment to the next. That helps with the predictability, and that decreases any type of tantrums or problematic behavior once the transition off of the screen begins. The third thing you can do is provide structured support for transitions, because let's face it, going from a high stimulating environment to absolutely nothing is a recipe for a disaster. So what you can do is set up the transition by letting them know what's coming up next, using the visual schedule if you need to help identify what's coming up next on the schedule. You can even help the transition with timers or countdowns or anything that kind of helps let them know that a transition may be coming, that the screen time is coming to a close or an end. Anything that can help them to start to shift their minds, to start get that momentum going towards what we're doing next, is going to help and make that transition much smoother and much easier. The next thing we can do is build alternative regulation pathways. Screens shouldn't be the only way that a child regulates themselves. Can we go outside and go for a walk? Can we do some deep breathing techniques? Can we drink some water? Anything to help them get reintegrated back into society so they can get back into the pattern of everyday life will help support them with transitions and also help them to regulate themselves when screens are not around, helping them to expand their regulation toolbox. And the last thing you can do is watch the pattern, not just the time. The pattern is how they act when they get off of the screens, when the transition is done. Are they more irritable? Do they seem to become more aggressive, either physically or verbally? Do they make threats? Do you see any other type of problematic behavior once that transition is coming up? It doesn't really matter how long they're on. Obviously, we want to keep those times short, no more than 30 minutes to an hour in one sitting. But at the same time, we want to identify, is this something that they can handle? Or is this something that's causing too much emotional dysregulation? Because again, we're looking to develop patterns, and if they understand that this is how much I can play for this long, and it happens every day at that time, that's sustainable. But if it's a little bit here, a little bit there, as a matter of fact, a lot longer here, that's when things become unpredictable, and those transitions off and onto the screen become very, very abrasive. So here's some closing thoughts. For many autistic children, screens aren't just a habit. They're a support. They're reinforcement for some. So instead of saying, how do we get rid of the supports? We need to understand it. That way we can expand the toolbox and help with different regulation skills. So if this video helps you look at screen time and its effect on children on the autism spectrum a little bit differently, stay tuned, because we're going to have a number of videos that help you to regulate screen time as well as to regulate behavior. You can start by checking out our Behavior Bootcamp for Parents, and you can continue to get information like this every week by liking, subscribing, and hitting that notification bell. Because as always, we'll see you on the next one, so stay tuned.